Using a software design project you worked on as a business analyst, give detailed step-by-step and description of how you handled the product owner role with backlogs and 2-week sprint. As a business analyst and also supporting and working as the product owner, my key responsibilities involve managing the product backlog, facilitating 2-week sprints, and ensuring that the development team stayed aligned with the project goals. Here's a detailed, step-by-step breakdown of how I always handle this role. 1. Backlog management. Step 1. Gathering requirements. I began by gathering detailed requirements from stakeholders through workshops, interviews, and surveys. This included both business stakeholders, e.g., department heads, and end users, e.g., customer service representatives who would use the system daily. I documented user stories that reflected their needs and expectations. I ensured that each user story followed the INVEST criteria: independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, testable, to make sure it was actionable for the development team. Step 2. Prioritizing the backlog. After gathering all the requirements, I collaborated with the stakeholders to prioritize user stories based on business value, urgency, and technical dependencies. I used a Moscow prioritization framework: must have, should have, could have, and won't have, to ensure that critical features were delivered first. I continuously refined and reprioritized the backlog during each sprint review, based on feedback from stakeholders and the team's progress. Step 3. Writing detailed user stories. For each sprint, I wrote detailed user stories that included acceptance criteria, clear descriptions, and mock-ups when necessary. This ensured the development team had a clear understanding of what was required for each feature. I collaborated closely with the development and design teams to ensure that the user stories were feasible and that any technical constraints were taken into account. 2. Sprint planning. Step 4. Sprint backlog preparation. For each 2-week sprint, I worked with the team during the sprint planning meeting to select a set of high-priority user stories from the product backlog. We reviewed the complexity of each story and estimated the effort using story points. We used a Fibonacci sequence. I made sure the team was clear on the definition of done for each story, which included completing development, testing, and acceptance by stakeholders. We aimed for a balanced sprint that included a mix of new features, bug fixes, and technical debt resolution. Step 5. Sprint goals. I worked closely with the development team and stakeholders to establish clear sprint goals. These goals helped align the team's efforts with the overall product vision and provided a measurable objective to achieve by the end of the 2-week cycle. For example, in one sprint, the goal was to complete the user registration and login features, including social media integrations. This gave everyone a clear, focused outcome to achieve by the sprint's end. 3. Daily Scrum and development support. Step 6. Facilitating daily stand-ups. As part of the product owner role, I joined the daily stand-ups to track progress, answer questions, and remove blockers that could delay the team. My role was to ensure the team had all the information they needed to complete their tasks without distractions. If there were any issues or roadblocks, I would follow up immediately after the stand-up, either by reaching out to stakeholders for additional clarification or addressing technical dependencies. Step 7. Clarifying requirements and handling change. Throughout the sprint, I remained accessible to the team to clarify any questions they had about the user stories or acceptance criteria. Sometimes, unexpected changes arose due to new business requirements or technical constraints. In such cases, I worked quickly with stakeholders to assess the impact and reprioritized the backlog if necessary. 4. Sprint review and retrospective. Step 8. Sprint review. At the end of each sprint, I facilitated a sprint review session where the development team demonstrated the completed features to stakeholders. During this meeting, I gathered feedback on whether the functionality met expectations and discussed any further changes or improvements. Based on this feedback, I updated the product backlog and adjusted priorities for the upcoming sprint. I also made sure that the stakeholders were fully engaged in the process, ensuring that their vision for the product was being realized. Step 9. Sprint retrospective. After the sprint review, I led the sprint retrospective with the development team. Here, we discussed what went well, what didn't, and how we could improve in the next sprint. Common themes included refining our estimation techniques and improving communication between teams, e.g., development and design. We also looked for ways to improve velocity without sacrificing quality, such as automating repetitive tasks or refining our user story writing process to reduce misunderstandings. 5. Continuous backlog refinement. Step 10. Ongoing backlog refinement between sprints. I continuously refined the product backlog by grooming stories that were in the pipeline. This involves splitting larger user stories into smaller, more manageable pieces, updating acceptance criteria based on stakeholder feedback, and reprioritizing items to align with evolving business goals. I also worked closely with the developers to ensure that any technical debt or necessary refactoring tasks were captured in the backlog and addressed in upcoming sprints. Result: by using this structured approach, we consistently delivered working software in 2-week increments. Each sprint provided clear, tangible progress, which stakeholders appreciated. The project was completed on time, and the product met the client's requirements for both web and mobile platforms. We also maintained a steady velocity, improving efficiency as the team grew more familiar with the process. This experience demonstrated my ability to balance both business and technical needs, ensuring that the backlog was well managed and that the team could deliver quality results in each sprint.